The email arrived on a Thursday afternoon, right as I was reviewing grand jury indictments in my office at the U.S. Attorney's headquarters in downtown Boston. It wasn't dramatic. No subject line written in all caps. No obvious anger. Just a few carefully chosen sentences that carried more weight than shouting ever could. Sarah, your sister Melissa is co-chairing the Children's Hospital Gala on Saturday with Amanda Richardson, Congressman Richardson's wife. This is a critical networking event for Melissa's business. Elite clients will be there. You are not to attend. Your presence would be embarrassing given your situation. I read it twice, then a third time. My situation. That was what my mother called my life now. Not my career, not my work, not the cases I handled or the responsibilities I carried. Just my situation, as if I were dealing with an unfortunate illness or a temporary lapse in judgment, something best kept out of sight when important people were around. 3 years earlier, I had been on track for everything my family valued. I was a senior associate at Morrison & Price, one of Boston's most prestigious corporate law firms. Partner track, corner office in sight. A $320,000 salary with bonuses that made my parents beam whenever they told their friends where I worked. I had done everything right until I hadn't. I walked away. I left the firm to become an assistant U.S. attorney. I traded money for meaning, prestige for purpose. I went from negotiating corporate mergers to prosecuting federal crimes, organized crime, corruption, human trafficking, financial fraud that ruined lives quietly and completely. To me, it wasn't a step down. It was the first step toward the career I actually wanted. To my family, it was a failure. "You're throwing away your life," my mother had said when I told her. "For what? To play hero? To do work that matters," I had replied. She hung up on me. Since then, that moment had followed me like a shadow. Every holiday, every family gathering I was quietly excluded from. Every sideways comment about how things hadn't worked out the way we hoped. Melissa, my younger sister, had stepped neatly into the space I left behind. With me no longer being the success story, she finally had room to become one. She built a boutique interior design firm catering to Boston's elite. She joined the right clubs, attended the right charity events, married the right man, a hedge fund manager with a Beacon Hill address and summers in the Hamptons. She was exactly what our family wanted to present to the world, and I was not. So when my mother told me not to attend the gala, it wasn't surprising. It was simply confirmation of something I already knew. In their eyes, I had become an inconvenience, a reminder of a choice they didn't approve of, a risk to the image they were carefully maintaining. I deleted the email and went back to my work. On my desk sat files for a RICO case against a Boston crime family we were 3 weeks away from taking to trial. 2 cooperating witnesses, years of wiretaps, solid evidence. If we won, it would dismantle an organization that had terrorized neighborhoods for decades. My phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. "Mom told you about Saturday, right? Please don't come." I stared at the screen longer than I wanted to admit. Then I typed back something neutral. Something safe. "Congratulations on co-chairing. Hope it goes well." It wasn't enough. "Promise me you won't show up," she replied. "Amanda Richardson is everything for my business. I can't have my prosecutor sister scaring people away." That was when it stung. Not because I wanted to attend, not because I needed to be there, but because my own sister believed my existence was something that frightened people, something that embarrassed her, something that needed to be managed. I put the phone face down and took a breath. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I had done that before. It never helped. Sometimes being erased by your own family doesn't come with shouting or cruelty. Sometimes it comes quietly, politely, wrapped in phrases like, "your situation," and "this isn't personal." But it always feels the same. Like being told without being told that you no longer belong. After I set my phone down, the office went quiet again, the familiar hum of fluorescent lights filling the space. I turned back to the files on my desk, trying to let the weight of the exchange settle somewhere I didn't have to feel it. This was the part my family never saw the hours after the conversations ended, when I returned to work that demanded focus, precision, and the kind of emotional discipline you didn't get credit for. They thought I'd left a good job. They had no idea where I'd actually gone. I worked out of a federal building in downtown Boston, the kind with narrow hallways, reinforced doors, and a security desk that never slept. I wasn't negotiating contracts anymore. I was prosecuting people who didn't lose sleep over destroying entire communities. Organized crime figures, corrupt politicians, traffickers who treated human beings like inventory. My days were filled with wiretap transcripts, financial records, cooperating witnesses who could change their minds at any moment, and evidence that had to be airtight because the defense teams were ruthless and well-funded. I didn't talk about it much. You couldn't, even if you wanted to. Confidentiality wasn't optional. Neither was discretion. So when my family asked vague questions, when they bothered to ask at all, I gave careful, clipped answers. I said I was a prosecutor. I said I worked for the U.S. Attorney's Office. I assumed that was enough. It wasn't. Somewhere along the way, they decided that meant local courts. Small cases, traffic-level justice, something respectable but unimpressive. Something they could politely gloss over when friends asked where I'd ended up after leaving Morrison and Price. They never knew that my work weeks regularly hit 70 hours, that my calendar was packed with meetings with the FBI, Homeland Security, and state task forces coordinating multi-jurisdictional cases. They didn't know I had stood in federal court and argued motions that determined whether years of covert investigation would survive a suppression hearing. They didn't know I had already put away a state senator for corruption, or that I had helped dismantle a human trafficking ring that spanned 3 states and left 17 women free because someone finally believed them. They didn't know that the organized crime case on my desk had been building for nearly a decade before I ever touched it, and that a single misstep could let the entire enterprise walk. Last year, at 32, I had been promoted to Senior Assistant U.S. Attorney. It came with more responsibility, more scrutiny, and more dangerous cases. It didn't come with a press release my parents would read. It didn't come with a title they understood or a number they could brag about. They also didn't know that I'd received death threats, real ones, specific enough that the FBI had taken them seriously. For months, I had a security detail. I changed my routines. I checked my surroundings instinctively. I learned how to carry that kind of awareness without letting it harden me. When I tried to explain the job in the beginning, what federal prosecution actually meant, my mother had waved it away. "You're making $90,000, she said then, horrified. "You were making more than 3 times that. Why would you do this to yourself?" I had tried to tell her that impact wasn't reflected on a paycheck, that federal prosecutors handled the cases local offices couldn't touch, that the work mattered because it was hard and dangerous and necessary. She had already decided I was naive. After that, I stopped offering details. I stopped correcting assumptions. I let them believe what they wanted because correcting them felt like begging to be understood by people who had already made up their minds. My colleagues knew the truth. Judges knew. Defense attorneys who had once been my peers at law school now treated me like an opponent they had to respect. The U.S. attorney himself had mentioned my name when discussing future judicial vacancies. None of that ever made it back to my family. They saw the pay cut. They saw the absence from corporate holiday parties. They saw a daughter who stepped off the path they recognized and assumed she'd fallen off entirely. So when my mother called my career a situation, she wasn't being cruel. She was being honest about how little she actually knew. And I let her stay that way. Not because I was ashamed of my work, but because I was tired of explaining a life they never truly wanted to understand. Melissa had always been watching me. Not in the obvious way, not with open resentment or hostility. It was quieter than that, more patient. Growing up, I was the one our parents pointed to when they talked about potential, the good grades, the awards, Harvard Law, the clerkship. I didn't notice how much space that took up because to me, it was just forward motion. To Melissa, it was a shadow she never asked to stand under. When I left corporate law, she didn't celebrate openly. She didn't have to. The relief showed up in smaller ways. In how my name stopped coming up at family dinners. In how our parents started talking about her business with a kind of pride I hadn't heard directed at her before. With me no longer filling the role of the successful one, there was room for her to step into it. She stepped in carefully. Melissa built her interior design firm the way our family respected strategically. She cultivated clients who lived in the right zip codes. She joined boards, attended fundraisers, aligned herself with people whose names carried weight. She understood that talent mattered, but proximity mattered more. Success, in her world, was something you curated, and she was good at it. By the time the gala came around, she wasn't just another designer hoping to network. She was co-chairing a major charity event alongside one of the most influential women in the room. That mattered to her in a way I didn't fully understand at first. This wasn't about money. It was about validation, about finally being the daughter our parents could point to without qualifiers. So when I re-entered the picture, even indirectly, I wasn't just her sister. I was a variable she couldn't control. Her texts made that clear. At first, she framed it as concern. "It's a big night for me." Then it shifted. "You made your choice." Finally, the truth slipped out. "I can't have my prosecutor sister scaring people away." That sentence wasn't about fear. It was about comparison. In Melissa's mind, the gala was her stage. The one place where she was indisputably the successful sibling, where she could introduce herself without someone inevitably asking about me, where she could be impressive without footnotes. And I threatened that not by trying, but simply by existing. She didn't know what I actually did. Or maybe she didn't want to know. It was easier to tell people I worked in law enforcement and leave it vague. Easier to downplay my career than risk it becoming the thing people focused on instead of her business. I don't think she realized how much she'd reduced me in the process. To her, my career was something unfortunate but manageable. A background detail, a phase. She genuinely believed that if I stayed away from her important moments, everything would stay balanced, that she could finally have something that was hers. When she said, "Let those of us who made smart choices have this," she wasn't trying to be cruel. She was revealing how she measured success and how she believed our parents did too. Smart choices meant visible prestige, predictable paths, lives that fit neatly into conversation. My choice didn't fit, so she framed it as a mistake. What hurt wasn't that she wanted the spotlight, it was that she thought I was competing for it, that she believed my presence alone would diminish her, as if everything we were could only exist in comparison. I had never seen our lives that way. I wasn't trying to win. I wasn't trying to outshine her. I had already built a life that made sense to me. But Melissa needed there to be a winner, because that was the only way she could justify the years she'd spent feeling second. So she asked me to stay away, not because she hated me, but because she needed, desperately, to believe that success was finite and that this one night belonged to her alone. I set the phone down and didn't respond again. At the time, I told myself it didn't matter, that I understood where she was coming from, that she was under pressure and doing what she thought she had to do. But the truth was harder. For the first time, I realized that Melissa didn't just misunderstand my life. She needed it to be smaller than hers. After Melissa's last message, I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I had already said what little there was to say, and anything more would have sounded like an argument I didn't want to win. I told myself the gala wasn't my world anyway, that it belonged to her. That staying away was the simplest way to keep the peace. I meant it, at least at first. I turned back to my work, to the organized crime case that had been sitting on my desk for months. Boxes of financial records, transcripts from wiretaps that spanned years. The kind of case that required patience, discipline, and a tolerance for long stretches of anonymity. The work didn't care about my family drama. It demanded the same focus, whether I was invited to a gala or quietly erased from one. That was when Kevin, my paralegal, stepped into my doorway with a slim folder in his hands. "The Richardson disclosures just came in," he said. "Congressman Richardson's financials. You wanted them for the Phillips corruption case." I nodded and told him to leave them on my desk. He hesitated, then asked if I was okay. I told him it was family stuff. He winced in the way people do when they don't know the details but can guess the shape of the problem. After he left, I glanced down at the folder again. Richardson. The name sat there longer than it should have, because Congressman Richardson wasn't just a name in a disclosure document to me. His wife, Amanda, was someone I'd known for over a decade. Amanda and I had been roommates at Harvard Law. Not casual acquaintances, Real roommates. We'd shared a tiny apartment during one leader, survived cold calls and curved grades, and the quiet brutality of being surrounded by the smartest people in the room. We studied together, took breaks together, held each other together on the nights when the pressure felt unbearable. When law school ended, we didn't drift apart. We chose different paths, but we stayed close. She clerked for a federal judge, then married James Richardson as his political career took off. I went into prosecution. Different worlds on the surface, but we kept finding our way back to coffee, to texts, to check-ins that didn't require explanations. She knew exactly what I did for a living. Amanda followed my cases. She texted after major convictions. When a human trafficking case made the news, she wrote, "I saw it. I'm so proud of you." When I received a credible death threat and the FBI stepped in, she called immediately, not to ask for details, but to ask if I was safe. That was what real friends did. My family had never known any of this. They didn't know Amanda and I were friends because they'd never asked about law school beyond where I ranked and what firm I joined. Once I left corporate law, their curiosity stopped altogether. 2 weeks earlier, Amanda had texted me something that had seemed almost random at the time. "Lunch soon? I miss you. Also, are you related to a Melissa Chin? She's co-chairing the hospital gala with me." I had smiled at the irony and written back that Melissa was my younger sister. Amanda had replied with an amused observation about Melissa's enthusiasm and her focus on networking. "Very different energy from you," she'd said. I hadn't thought much of it then. Now, sitting alone in my office, staring at my sister's final message telling me to stay away, the connection clicked into place. I opened my phone and scrolled to Amanda's contact. My thumb hovered over the screen longer than I expected. This wasn't about revenge. I didn't want to embarrass Melissa. I didn't want to prove anything to my parents. I was tired of shrinking, tired of stepping aside to make other people comfortable with a version of me that wasn't real. I typed a simple message. "Is the invitation to Saturday still open?" Her response came almost immediately. "Absolutely. I'll add you to the VIP list. I'm so glad you're coming." There was a pause. Then another text. "Quick question. Does your family know we're friends?" I stared at that for a moment before answering honestly. "No, I don't think so." "Why?" she asked. I didn't explain. I just wrote, "Long story. I'll tell you Saturday." I set the phone down and leaned back in my chair, feeling something shift. Not excitement, not nerves, just a quiet certainty that for once, I wasn't going to make myself smaller to fit someone else's comfort. I wasn't crashing Melissa's event. I was attending a gala hosted by a woman who knew exactly who I was and had never once treated me like an embarrassment. Saturday night arrived faster than I expected. The Four Seasons ballroom glowed the way places like that always do, soft lighting, polished floors, quiet confidence in every detail. This wasn't the kind of room that tried to impress. It assumed it already had. Black tie. $1,000 a plate. Boston's elite, moving easily among themselves, exchanging names and histories that didn't need explaining. I arrived just after 7, early enough to avoid attention, late enough not to look unsure. I wore a navy gown I'd bought years ago for legal conferences, simple, tailored, unremarkable. I wasn't trying to stand out. I was just done trying to disappear. At the entrance, Melissa stood beside Amanda, greeting guests with practiced warmth. Melissa looked flawless in an emerald dress, every detail calibrated. She was mid-conversation with an older couple when Amanda looked up and saw me. Her face lit instantly. "Sarah." She crossed the entrance hall without hesitation and pulled me into a hug that was genuine, familiar, and unmistakably public. "I'm so glad you came. You look beautiful." I felt it then, the shift. The subtle pause in conversations around us. The quick recalibration of attention. Melissa turned at the sound of my name, her smile still in place until she saw me standing there. "What are you doing here?" she asked, too quickly. "Amanda invited me," I said, calmly. Amanda laughed, looping her arm through mine. "Of course I did. Sarah was my roommate at Harvard Law. We've been best friends for over a decade." The words landed harder than I expected. Melissa's expression froze, confusion washing into something closer to alarm. "Your roommate? Best friends," Amanda corrected easily. "Come on, Sarah, let me introduce you." Before Melissa could recover, Amanda turned to the couple she'd been speaking with. "James, could you come here?" Congressman Richardson joined us, tall and composed in his tuxedo. Amanda smiled up at him. "This is Sarah Chin. I've told you about her 100 times." His eyes lit with recognition. "Of course. Miss Chin, it's wonderful to finally meet you. Amanda talks about you constantly." "The pleasure's mine, Congressman," I said. "Please," he replied, smiling, "call me James. Anyone who helped my wife survive one leader deserves that." He turned back to the couple beside Melissa. "May I introduce Sarah Chin, a senior assistant U.S. attorney and one of the finest prosecutors in Massachusetts." The man's eyebrows rose. "The Sarah Chin who prosecuted the Giordano case?" "Yes, sir." "Remarkable work," he said, genuinely impressed. "That conviction sent shockwaves through organized crime in New England." His wife nodded. "And the Senator Morrison corruption case. We followed that closely. Your work has been invaluable." I glanced at Melissa. She hadn't moved. Her mouth was slightly open, as if the words weren't reaching her fast enough to make sense. Amanda squeezed my arm. "Come on," she said brightly. "There are people I want you to meet." For the next hour, I felt like I was moving through a version of reality my family had never imagined. Donors knew my cases. Board members referenced specific prosecutions. A retired judge complimented an appellate brief I'd filed the year before. These weren't polite exchanges. They were informed, respectful conversations with people who understood exactly what my work meant. "You didn't tell me you were famous," Amanda teased quietly at one point. "I'm not," I said. "I'm just doing my job." She smiled. "The Attorney General quoted you in a speech last month. That counts." Across the room, I saw Melissa standing with our parents, who had arrived late. My mother's face was tight with confusion. My father looked unsettled, glancing between me and the people gathered around my table. At 8:30, Amanda tapped her champagne glass and stepped onto the small stage. The room quieted. She spoke about the hospital, the children it served, the importance of the evening. Then she paused. "I'd like to recognize someone special tonight," she said. "Someone who embodies what public service actually looks like." Her eyes found mine. "My dear friend Sarah Chin is here with us this evening. She's a senior assistant, U.S. attorney who prosecutes some of the most complex federal crimes in our state: organized crime, corruption, human trafficking, cases that require extraordinary courage and skill." My heart began to race. "Sarah," Amanda said gently, "would you stand?" I rose slowly, my hands unsteady. The applause started immediately. Not polite, not brief. It grew, spreading across the room until people were standing, clapping with the kind of respect that couldn't be mistaken. I didn't look at my family. I didn't need to. For the first time, the room knew exactly who I was long before my own family ever did. The applause eventually faded, but the silence that followed felt heavier than the noise ever had. I sat back down slowly, my face warm, my pulse still racing. Amanda leaned over and whispered an apology for putting me on the spot. I told her it was fine. I meant it. The moment had already passed. What lingered now wasn't embarrassment, it was the unavoidable reality the room had just witnessed. Across the ballroom, my family stood frozen. My mother's face had gone pale, the color draining from her cheeks as if she were trying to reprocess the last 3 years all at once. My father stared at me with an expression I didn't recognize, something between disbelief and dawning comprehension. And Melissa looked like she was struggling to breathe. For a long moment, none of them moved. Then, my mother approached my table. She wore the same composed expression she used at formal events, but her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed the fabric of her dress before sitting down. "Sarah," she said carefully, "may I speak with you?" "Of course," I replied. She hesitated, glancing around the room, as if still unsure whether this conversation was real. "I didn't realize you knew Amanda Richardson." "We were roommates at Harvard," I said. "You never asked." She flinched. "And your work?" She said. "You're a federal prosecutor." "Yes, a senior assistant U.S. attorney." Her mouth opened, then closed. "We thought when you said you were working in prosecution, you meant local courts, district attorney, something like that." "I work for the United States government," I said evenly. "My cases are in federal court." She stared at her hands. We didn't understand. I explained it when I took the job, I replied. You told me I was throwing my life away. After that, I stopped trying. The words weren't sharp. They didn't need to be. Before she could respond, Melissa appeared beside us, her eyes red, her makeup slightly smudged. Sarah, I need to talk to you. She didn't wait for permission. I told people you worked in law enforcement, she said quickly. Like a police officer. I didn't know you were this. She gestured vaguely toward the ballroom, toward the people still glancing at me with unmistakable respect. I tried to tell you, I said. You weren't interested. I didn't think. Her voice broke. I thought you left the firm because you couldn't handle it. I let that hang between us. I left because I didn't want that life, I said quietly. Not because I failed at it. Melissa wiped at her eyes, her voice dropping. Amanda Richardson is my biggest opportunity. These people, they're my target clients. And now they all know you're my sister. The federal prosecutor. The one they admire. This isn't a competition, I said. Her laugh was short and bitter. It is in our family. It always has been. My father joined us then, adjusting his cufflinks in a way that signaled discomfort. That was quite an introduction Amanda gave you, he said. Federal prosecutor. Yes, I replied. I suppose I didn't fully understand what you were doing, he admitted. When you said you were leaving Morrison and Price for the U.S. Attorney's Office, I assumed it was less prestigious. It's the most prestigious criminal prosecution office in the state, I said. Federal prosecutors handle the cases local offices can't. He nodded slowly. The Whitmore Foundation donated $50,000 tonight. Robert Whitmore spent 20 minutes talking about your work. He called your RICO case landmark. I worked hard on it, I said. Why didn't you tell us about these successes? He asked. I laughed, a quiet sound without humor. You told me I was an embarrassment. You stopped inviting me to family events. Why would I share my achievements with people who'd already decided I'd failed? The words landed harder than any accusation. My mother closed her eyes. We were worried about your future. No, I said. You were worried about status, about what you could tell your friends. She didn't argue. For the first time, there was nothing left to misunderstand. They were looking at the same facts the room had seen, my work, my reputation, the respect I'd earned, and realizing how completely wrong they had been. And there was no way to undo that realization. The truth had finally caught up with them, and it didn't ask permission. The conversation with my family ended abruptly, not because anything had been resolved, but because something far more decisive interrupted it. Amanda reappeared at my side, her expression unreadable in the way it became when she was about to handle something she considered non-negotiable. Sarah, she said gently, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's someone I want you to meet. My mother opened her mouth, clearly intending to continue, but Amanda had already turned away, guiding me across the ballroom with a quiet urgency. The room seemed to part for her without effort. People recognized that look. It was the look of someone who knew exactly where she was going and why. She's at the VIP table, Amanda said softly as we walked. She came as a surprise. My heart began to pound before she said the name. Judge Morrison is here. For a split second, I thought I had misheard her. Judge Patricia Morrison. My former mentor. The woman whose chambers I had clerked in after law school. One of the most respected appellate judges in the country. Brilliant. Exacting. Not known for empty praise or casual appearances. I stopped walking. Amanda turned back to me. She heard you were attending and wanted to say hello. I followed her, my mind racing, every instinct from my clerkship kicking in at once. At the corner table sat Judge Morrison, elegant and unmistakable, her presence commanding without effort. She wore a deep purple gown, her posture perfectly straight, her expression sharp but warm. When she saw me, she stood. Sarah Chin, she said, smiling. How wonderful to see you. Judge Morrison, I replied automatically. This is an honor. The honor is mine, she said, dismissing the notion with a wave of her hand. I've been following your work. My breath caught. You have? The Phillips corruption case, she continued. Masterful. And your RICO prosecution against the Giordano family particularly impressive. You built on precedents I set 15 years ago. You used them better than I did. Coming from anyone else, it might have sounded generous. From her, it was precise, measured. unmistakably sincere. "Thank you," I said. "Your opinions were foundational to our strategy." She smiled, pleased. "I also hear through reliable channels that you're on the short list for the next federal appointment. The U.S. Attorney was kind enough to recommend me," I said carefully. "Richard Chin doesn't give recommendations lightly," she replied. "He told me you're one of the finest legal minds he's worked with." She paused, then lowered her voice slightly. "When the time comes, I'll be calling the Senate Judiciary Committee myself. You clerked for me. I know your judgment. You'd make an excellent judge." For a moment, the room disappeared. Then I heard a soft gasp behind me. I turned to see Melissa standing a few feet away, a champagne flute frozen halfway to her lips. She had followed us without realizing what she was walking into. Judge Morrison noticed her immediately. "And you are?" "Melissa Chin," she said faintly. "Sarah's sister." The judge smiled politely. "Ah, the interior designer Amanda mentioned. Co-chairing tonight's event, yes? Wonderful work for a wonderful cause." "Thank you, Your Honor," Melissa whispered. Judge Morrison turned back to me. "Sarah, let's have lunch soon. I'd like to discuss the appellate brief you filed last month. Your Fourth Amendment analysis was particularly innovative." "I'd be honored," I said. As the judge returned to her conversation, Melissa grabbed my arm, her grip tight. "A federal judge just said she's going to call the Senate for you," she said, her voice shaking. "Do you understand what that means?" "It means she thinks I'd be a good judge," I replied. "No," Melissa said, her eyes wide. "It means you're going to be a federal judge before you're 35. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Across the room, I could feel my parents watching. They had followed the exchange from a distance, catching fragments of words they couldn't reinterpret or minimize. This wasn't applause. This wasn't social polish. This was authority, quiet, unimpeachable, final. Whatever doubts they had left evaporated in that moment. There was nothing left to explain. The truth had arrived wearing a judge's robe, and it spoke with a certainty no one in my family could argue with anymore. The gala ended quietly for me after that. Not because there was nothing left to say, but because everything that mattered had already been said without words. The introductions slowed. The music softened. People began drifting toward the exits in small, satisfied clusters. I gathered my coat from the back of my chair, ready to leave before the night demanded anything more from me. Amanda found me near the door. "You're leaving already?" she asked gently. "It's been a long night," I said. She nodded, studying my face. "I hope I didn't put you on the spot up there." "You didn't," I said honestly. "You did exactly what you always do. You showed up." Her jaw tightened slightly. "Your family was treating you like an embarrassment. I couldn't stand that." "I know," I said. "Thank you." She hugged me, firm and brief. "Coffee next week. I want to hear everything. James is fascinated by the corruption patterns you exposed. He's already thinking about legislation." As I turned to leave, my mother appeared beside me. "Sarah," she said quietly, "may I drive you home?" I hesitated. "I have my car." "Please," she said, "I'd like to talk." We drove through Boston in silence, the city lights reflecting off the windshield. 10 minutes passed before she spoke. "I owe you an apology," she said, "a significant one." I didn't respond right away. "Your father and I have spent 3 years treating you like you made a mistake," she continued, "like you threw away your potential. Tonight, I watched federal judges, congressmen, philanthropists, people whose opinions I respect, treat you with genuine admiration, not because of money, because of your work." I stared out the window. "I didn't see it," she said. "I didn't want to see it. I was measuring success with the wrong ruler." "You were," I said quietly. She swallowed. "I'm sorry. Truly." The car stopped at a red light. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Judge Morrison clerked for Justice Brennan," she added, as if she'd memorized the fact to anchor herself. "She's not generous with praise. If she says you should be a judge, she means it." "I know," I said. "I want to understand what you do," my mother said. "I want to be proud of you the way I should have been all along." I turned to look at her then. She seemed smaller somehow, older, not diminished, just stripped of certainty. "An apology doesn't erase 3 years," I said. "Of being excluded, of being told I was an embarrassment, of being treated like I failed." "I know," she said. and I don't expect forgiveness overnight. But I want to do better. We pulled up in front of my building. Before I got out, she spoke again. Judge Morrison mentioned an appellate brief you filed, she said carefully. Would you be willing to explain it to me sometime? I'd like to understand your work. I studied her face. This wasn't pride fueled by gossip anymore. It was curiosity. Late, imperfect, but real. There's something you need to understand, I said. If you're going to be part of my life, you need to accept that I chose this career because it's what I want, not because I failed at something else, not because I settled. She nodded. I understand. Do you? I asked. Because when the glow of tonight fades, when no one's applauding, you need to still believe I made the right choice. She was quiet for a long moment. Tonight, she said finally. I watched my daughter receive a standing ovation for work that protects people. I watched a judge who knows you well say she'll recommend you for the bench. I watched you be respected in ways I didn't know how to recognize before. I don't think I'll forget that. I opened the door. Good night, Mom. As I walked upstairs, my phone buzzed. Missed calls, texts, messages piling in, Melissa apologizing, my father saying he was proud, relatives suddenly curious, Amanda laughing about the aftermath. I didn't answer. Some apologies need time. Some changes need proof. And for the first time in years, I wasn't willing to rush past the hurt just to make everyone else comfortable. Understanding, if it came, would have to come slowly. And on my terms. Sunday morning came quietly. No spotlight, no applause. Just sunlight cutting across my living room floor and my phone vibrating nonstop on the kitchen counter. I didn't rush to check it. I went for a run along the Charles River first, letting the cold air burn away the last of the night before. The city moved the way it always did, joggers, cyclists, early coffee lines, completely indifferent to galas, judges, or standing ovations. When I got back, I finally looked at my phone. 15 missed calls. Dozens of messages. Melissa, I'm so sorry. Can we talk? My father, very proud of you. Should have said it years ago. My mother, coffee this week? I want to hear about your work. Really hear about it. Amanda, people are still talking about you. Call me. And then one message that made me sit down. A clerk from Judge Morrison's chambers. She'd like to schedule lunch. By Monday morning, the ripple had spread further than I expected. A colleague texted to tell me I was trending on legal Twitter. Someone had posted about Judge Morrison's comments at the gala. Prosecutors, law students, even defense attorneys were weighing in not with gossip, but with respect. This is what public service looks like. Fair, ethical, brilliant. She'd make an outstanding judge. It was surreal and oddly grounding. Because none of it changed, the work waiting on my desk. On Monday afternoon, Melissa showed up at my office unannounced. She looked smaller there, sitting in a government building with bare walls and fluorescent lighting, far from the curated world she was used to. I came to apologize, she said. Actually apologize. She admitted what I already knew, that she'd been jealous, not because I was winning, but because she never understood what I was actually doing. That she'd measured success using our parents' standards and called anything else failure. That seeing Judge Morrison speak about my work had shattered the version of me she'd invented. I want to know the real you, she said, not the story I told myself. I told her I wasn't going to defend my career anymore. That if she wanted to be in my life, she'd have to accept it without comparison. She agreed. Over the next few months, things shifted not dramatically, but steadily. My mother started asking questions she'd never asked before, not about money, about impact, about why cases mattered. She attended a public lecture I gave at Harvard Law. My father sent me articles about judicial appointments with notes that simply said, "Proud of you." Judge Morrison became a mentor again, meeting me for lunch and challenging my thinking the way she always had. Amanda and I worked together on reform initiatives. Her husband introduced legislation based on patterns I'd identified in corruption cases. In March, a federal judgeship opened in the District of Massachusetts. The U.S. attorney submitted my name. Judge Morrison called the Senate Judiciary Committee. The confirmation moved faster than anyone expected. In June, at 33 years old, I stood in a packed courthouse and took the oath as a United States District Court judge. As I raised my right hand, I saw my former colleagues in the gallery, prosecutors, public defenders, people I'd stood across from in court who respected the work even when they fought it. And in the front row, my family changed, quieter, finally seeing me. After the ceremony, my mother pulled me aside. 3 years ago, she said, her voice shaking, I told you that you threw your life away. I was wrong. You didn't throw anything away. You built something extraordinary. I thanked her, but what I didn't say mattered more. I hadn't needed her approval to get here. I had needed courage, conviction, and the willingness to walk a harder path without applause. If there's one thing this journey taught me, it's this. Don't let anyone measure your life with a ruler they don't understand. Don't shrink to make others comfortable with your choices, and never confuse silence with insignificance. Sometimes the people closest to you won't recognize your worth until the world does. That doesn't mean you failed. It means they were late. So if you're watching this and you've been told you made the wrong choice, if your family doesn't understand your path, if you've been quietly building something meaningful while being treated like a disappointment, keep going. Your work matters. Your integrity matters. And one day, the truth will speak louder than every doubt they placed on you. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment if you've ever been underestimated by your own family. And subscribe for more real family stories about resilience, truth, and reclaiming your worth. Because success isn't what looks good from the outside. It's what you can stand behind without apology.